Let's pour one out in memory of OnePlus. This is a little something. This was, I should really finish this. This was something I wrote and I wanted to share with you. OnePlus, how times have changed. At one point, I loved you. My OnePlus 3T was an absolute gem of a device. It combined great charging, SoC, screen, and a good enough camera to satisfy my craving for a point-and-shoot device at the time. More importantly, it killed any desire I had for a Pixel. And for many people, the early OnePlus devices were, in fact, Pixel killers. Now it seems they have been killed by Pixel. The draw to OnePlus was always twofold. A clean, stock-like experience and pricing that struck that perfect balance. OnePlus phones were better Pixels than countless other Pixel devices that came before it. And in many markets, you had the enthusiasts on the hook for more of your budget stock-like goodness. I even remember watching countless Poco F1 versus OnePlus comparisons, where software was in fact the selling point for OnePlus devices and justified that extra expense to purchase a OnePlus phone over that Poco F1. Even though prices of OnePlus devices have slowly climbed, the tech community continued to embrace OnePlus as a brand. Cameras were no longer a point of contention. Screens continued to be tip-top, and software continued to improve with more and more features and slowly moving away from that completely stock Android experience and moving further away from that CyanogenMod mod that at the time was such a great selling point. Unfortunately, this was not sustainable. Although OnePlus dominated in the hearts and minds of millions of fans across the globe, it wasn't enough. Software development, marketing, and operation costs grew, and that created a need to expand the device portfolio or at least increase profits. Now, it's irrelevant whether or not Oppo wanted to cash in on the brand Carl Pei had helped develop and steer first, or OnePlus needed to justify itself in the portfolio of BBK companies. But one thing was for sure. OnePlus needed to make more money for its owner company BBK. And that's just kind of how the world works. Companies are obligated to return higher profits to shareholders, and thus they have to increase profitability. Now, one thing that I can confidently say though, is that the OnePlus 8 and the original OnePlus Nord are where things went downhill. Now, the OnePlus 8 was a great device, and many people consider that the OnePlus 8 and OnePlus 8 Pro was the last true OnePlus device. The brand that had touted itself as never settled kind of reached that apex with the OnePlus 8. And then that followed up with the OnePlus Nord, and the brand that touted itself as never settle was suddenly adding a 2-megapixel macro camera and a 5-megapixel depth camera to their mid-ranger, which in reality was a rebadged Oppo Reno 4. Now, I know what you're thinking. This isn't the first time OnePlus rebadged an Oppo device. Well, you're probably right. And although the original Nord, being a rebadged Oppo device, wasn't the first time OnePlus had done it, it was the most blatant example of OnePlus settling for simply a rebadge and cutting corners in order to reach a certain price point and certain profitability point. It's not hard to imagine that the money spent on those two worthless cameras could have gone into something like a metal chassis or longer software support. But one thing that was clear was that the Trojan horse of OnePlus to infiltrate the Western markets was finally coming to fruition. This BBK China brand had finally established a reputation, a brand name, and a following in Western markets that this Chinese brand could take advantage of. Although it might be difficult for me to pinpoint the exact moment in time that OnePlus fell off, I can say that this was a moment in time that OnePlus clearly made a switch. Now, I don't want this to be a completely negative video around OnePlus phones because they did fix a lot of issues that plagued their early devices, and they were able to genuinely make flagship devices, something that they could have never done before. Unfortunately, along with the Oppo Reno 4 rebadge came the promise of more rebadging, but now these rebadges also included software. But how did their departure from their roots lead them to such a quick downfall? Well, a large part of sales for OnePlus was that they had a hardcore base of people that loved their devices and recommended their devices to their friends. This was part of how they were able to launch in carrier stores across the United States and with little to no marketing, quickly gaining a foothold in the mind of American Android enthusiasts and just American consumers in general. User recommendations were a large part of how OnePlus was able to launch in carrier stores across the United States with very little marketing and kind of gain a foothold, not only in the hearts of Android enthusiasts, but also in the hearts of people that just wanted a great high-performance Android device and not break the bank. And unfortunately, abandoning their roots also meant abandoning the user base that suggested their devices to tons of people, and mostly people outside of the OnePlus sphere. Another harsh reality is that on the lower end devices, which it seemed like they began to focus on, users generally have very little brand loyalty. Most consumers do not care who manufactures their $350 smartphone, which they are getting for free or on contract. And very few of those consumers are going to be enthusiasts, and even fewer are going to care about what kind of experience they are going to be getting. They just want the cheapest device possible. A perfect example of this is LG. LG was a cost leader and provided very decent entry-level phones to consumers. But people that buy entry-level phones generally don't care about the brand, and thus it creates no brand loyalty. It's worth noting that Carl Pei left in middle to end of 2020, and because smartphones are generally developed a year to year and a half before launch, the OnePlus 8 was like the last phone that he had his hands on. But even then, how much did Carl Pei actually do, and really what influence does Carl Pei have? If you guys are curious about that, I have a whole video about Carl Pei's history and how he found himself in the position of kind of being at the forefront of a company owned by another company, and I'll have that video linked for you guys right over here. Now, if you guys want to see more videos from me, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. I promise I'm very rarely drinking whiskey in those videos, but sometimes when the subject calls for it, raise a glass.